In other words, telling her really what she meant to me in a very specific and detailed way. And she was just loving this. It was like I was massaging her soul. And then at the end of that, I remember collapsing on the ground and feeling this, dark energy just completely take over me. And I was like, wow, I'm possessed. I'm literally possessed by a demon. And I remember telling my wife, because I didn't want to freak her out, kind of get up close to her and whisper, honey, don't be scared. But I'm possessed by a demon. And she's got, how do you say that without getting someone concerned and scared? But, and so at that point, I knew that I was possessed by a demon, and I knew that it was never going to leave. And that was the scary thing. I was an experienced enough tripper, I knew that you always come down, and that the drugs always wear off, and that you'll be okay once that's done. But this time I knew somehow that this was with me and never going to leave. And of course that really was disconcerting. And I remember I'm called up a Catholic priest. I figured, well, they'll know how to do sort of an exorcism. And, I told him what happened and what was going on. He's like, it's the drugs. And I'm just thinking, dude, that's not the drugs. There's something, it's beyond that. The drugs have just opened this thing up. And of course, so that didn't go anywhere. And then I was telling my brother and his best friend, well, maybe if you go and get like one of these wild dogs that lives in our neighborhood, I'll kill the dog. I'll like a scapegoat, right? And I'll, direct the demon into that. And so, my brother and my best friend, they just, went outside to appease me and walked around like, wow, that dude's really, tripping balls to come up with that one, So eventually, I came down from that and reintegrated and got myself back together. But it was only in the past 2 years when I really dove back into this medicine path that I figured out what that was. That was just my shadow. It was my shadow saying, where's my soul massage? It was the little child inside of me. It was the victim of this trauma that I've had going like, well, what about me? And so everything that I experienced about that was completely true, that it was a demon that was going to stay inside me forever. I just exposed that shadow, and in the past 2 years I've realized that was just part of me, and now I've been able to reintegrate that. So that I was doing that kind of work, not really knowing, and I would say that most of the traumatic reintegration work that I've done has been in the past 2 years, now kind of coming full circle with that.
So has that this kind of leads me into the inspiration for the Peru trip. Has that healing and that kind of understanding of this is me that I'm looking at here, it's not necessarily something that's inhabiting me, or it is, but has that been kind of the through line now to go pull all these guys together and do this stuff? Or tell me the inspiration.
Yeah, well, so what happened is that basically I got myself good enough to be a decent enough husband and and father for the family we were about to raise through those initial couple years work of the plant medicine, where I did. And then my wife and I would maybe, MDMA once or twice a year and psychedelics, and we could fit it in as we were raising a family. And kids have been my medicine for the past 18 years. And then about 2 years ago, I reconnected with veterans. And I'd really never connected with veterans. I mean, I had friends that I'd gone to West Point with, that kind of thing, but never really kind of as a group. And 2 years ago, there was this normal veterans conference here in Austin. And I knew that veterans were coming back messed up from the war. I knew they were being put on the pharmaceuticals. I knew that they were killing themselves. But meeting veterans in person just totally blew my heart wide open. And I remember just spending the whole day with these other veterans crying. It was my head in my hands, and just that personal reality, kind of like with these medicines, where before it was just some kind of conception, like, wow, this is totally real. And what it did was opened me up and made me realize that I had trauma. Because I just never seen myself as a victim. I never, whatever things happen to you in life. And that's when I really got this sort of message that this veteran love is the best medicine. This veteran love is something that can open these things up. And then soon after that, I remember I was with the goalkeeper for my soccer team. He just joined us recently. He's a deaf guy, grew up in Hawaii, and he was talking to me after a game. This is maybe over a year ago, and he said, "So I see you like post stuff about Terrence McKenna on Facebook." He's like, "So have you ever done ayahuasca?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did it. Now about 19 years ago, Terrence McKenna's stuff, but only a couple times. Never really any super deep work that I've done more recently." And he's like, "Well, yeah, I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm supposed to get hooked up with some of the people in this community who are doing it." And he's like, "Oh, I'm part of that." And I'm like, "Well, there you go." So so about a little over a year ago, I drank ayahuasca for the first time in like 18 years with a community here, and just opened myself up to all these things that were in me that I didn't realize I needed to work on, that I had trauma, that I had, all these things that I needed to address. And yeah, so and through that, besides working on myself, I got a lot of understanding and downloads about veterans. And basically what I saw in a nutshell is that veterans are the ones that need this healing more than anyone, because we're the outputs of the war machine. And so I saw how these plant medicines could help with that, and then I just saw the bigger picture that veterans are as we're going through this big transformation, worldwide transformation, where, like I said, we're the output of this war machine, that veterans need to get this plant medicine healing, and then also be able to show people as exemplars or avatars of how we're going to be in this next phase of our existence. So, yeah, that's what set me off.
Well, that's good, and you're right, especially looking at all the stats and a lot of this BS, if you will, that's been fed to why we're doing what we're doing abroad. And I know there are particular reasons, and I don't want to get into ins and outs of all that, but being part of that war machine, and we have our young people coming back to this country that are completely traumatized. And how do we get around those stigmas? Because my father, he's a very conservative man, very much for the military, and he looks at drugs as drugs. It doesn't matter if it's marijuana or if it's heroin. And so he doesn't understand what the hell I'm doing. But it's really interesting, been a conversation, as you can imagine. But we have so many people that are affected by it, not just the individuals coming back, but all the family members, brother. Like, talk a little bit about that, and what sort of impacts, either on a personal level or you've seen through some of the others, and why that's important, not just for the individual, but also for the collective and the family around.
Sure, and I'll give a little bit more background too, kind of on my story. As I was at the film screening for A New Understanding a little over a year ago, and that's where I met this fellow veteran named Eric, who literally stood up in the question and answer session and said, "I'm a veteran, I have PTSD, how can I get these sacred plants?" And I started helping him, and helped him with MDMA and then mushrooms. And he'd already been planning a trip to Peru, where he did ayahuasca and wachuma, and didn't have maybe the healing he was hoping for with the ayahuasca. And so I told him, I said, "I don't go around telling people I told you, so I never do that, but you're going to get that." And I took him out to a ceremony October of last year. And that's the first time I took a veteran with war trauma to do ayahuasca as the kind of power plant medicine for his trauma. And he got all that first level of healing that he was looking for. And I guess just that kind of momentum for me just kept me going to keep on doing more of that. And from that ceremony is how I got connected with Carlos and his brothers. Basically, we met this guy named